Thank you. Good morning. I'm going to talk today about the Hawaii greenhouse gas rules and statewide greenhouse gas emission inventories. Okay, let me see. Okay, the greenhouse gas rules are required by Hawaii Act 234, and these rules specify a statewide greenhouse gas emission limit of 1990 levels by 2020. And this emission limit excludes aviation and international bunker fuel emissions and includes carbon sinks. And an example of a carbon sink would be forest or urban trees that absorb CO2 emissions, and these would be greenhouse gas reductions. And international bunker fuel emissions are emissions from planes and ships traveling from Hawaii to foreign countries. And to help meet the statewide greenhouse gas emission limit, the rules specify a greenhouse gas emission cap for large stationary sources with maximum potential carbon dioxide equivalent emissions greater than 100,000 tons per year. And this cap is a backstop to existing renewable energy and energy efficiency programs already in place by the State Energy Office. And in the rules, the cap is set at 16% below each affected facility's 2010 baseline emission level, unless an alternate baseline is approved between calendar years 2006 and 2010. And if a 16% or if the facility proposes a reduction less than 16%, a greenhouse gas control assessment is required to explain why a 16% reduction cannot be achieved. And biogenic carbon dioxide emissions are excluded from the cap requirement, which enables a facility to use biofuels to meet the greenhouse gas reductions. And the cap will be incorporated into each affected facility's permit. And we have 18 affected facilities shown in green on the map, and 2 affected facilities closed. They're shown in orange. HCNS closed on Maui, and Shipment Generating Station closed on the Big Island. And of the affected facilities, 16 are electric plants and 2 affected facilities are refineries. The refineries are located on Oahu, and most of the emissions from these affected facilities are on Oahu. For 2015, greenhouse gas emissions from affected facilities totaled 6.7 million metric tons, and we've issued the permits for 2 electric plants on Kauai to cap emissions, and we have 13 more permits going out for public comment to cap emissions from electric plants on the other islands. And these permits will be going out for public comment on April 16th. And let's see, we'll have 3 more facilities to permit after that. The 2 refineries on Oahu and 1 electric plant on the Big Island. That's Huhonua. And for the Big Island, emissions are expected to increase due to the closure of Puna Geothermal, which closed from volcanic activity. And if emissions are, if this renewable energy source was replaced with fossil fuel combustion to generate electricity, emissions would increase by 0.25 million metric tons. And the DOH must conduct annual evaluations to determine progress relative to the statewide greenhouse gas emission limit, and we've contracted ICF to provide 3 annual reports for the 2015 to 2017 emission years. And the first annual report was recently released, and it's available on our Clean Air Branch website. And here are 2 pie charts from the 2015 annual report. And the pie chart on the left shows that the energy sector accounts for a majority of the emissions, 90% of the emissions. And the primary emitters in this sector are transportation and stationary source combustion. And that's followed by the agriculture, forestry, and other land use sector at 5.2% of the overall statewide greenhouse gas emissions. And examples of sources in this sector are forest fires and agricultural soil carbon. And that's followed by the industrial process and product use sector at 3.9% of the overall emissions. And an example of sources in this sector would be hydrofluorocarbons from refrigeration and air conditioning systems. And that's followed by the waste sector at 3.7% of the total emissions. And sources in this sector include landfills and wastewater treatment. And the pie chart on the right shows that carbon dioxide is the primary contributor to the statewide greenhouse gas emissions on a carbon dioxide equivalent basis. And that's followed by methane. Carbon dioxide accounts for about 90%. Methane is the next largest contributor at 4.9%. And then there's hydrofluorocarbons and perfluorocarbons from the IPPU sector at 3.9%, and that's followed by nitrous oxide at 1.5%, and then sulfur hexafluoride is less than 0.1% of the overall emissions, and that's from electrical transmission and distribution. And here's a bar chart showing the trends in emissions from the 2015 report. Emissions increased from 1990 to 2007. And then from 2007 to 2015, emissions gradually decreased. And the driver to the trends is primarily from changes in emissions in the electric sector in dark blue. And in red shows negative numbers from sinks. And these are greenhouse gas reductions. And let's see, they're relatively constant from 1990 to 2015. However, for the 2016 and 17 reports, sinks will increase in magnitude because the consultant is using state-specific data to determine sinks from forest carbon rather than default parameters. And here's a bar chart showing that Hawaii is on track at meeting its statewide greenhouse gas emission limit of 1990 levels by 2020. For 2020, greenhouse gas emissions are projected to be 3.88 million metric tons, which is below the 1990 level of 14.43 million metric tons. However, these numbers will change in the future inventory reports as more accurate data becomes available to determine greenhouse gas emissions. And for the 2020 and 2025 reductions, those are based on projections that electric plants in the energy sector will meet the clean energy standards established by the State Energy Office. And that's it. Thank you.